try something else. I am going to try stealing Lisa's light too, so I am doubly lit. Really, I know, hey? What do you think? I can see! I was thinking about that. So, you may recall that a couple of weeks ago I did a talk about being in Portland, Oregon for the solar eclipse. You all remember that? I'd flown to Portland primarily to go to a conference that Centers for Spiritual Living was putting on. But since I was going to be there anyway, I took some time to visit with my brother and his family because they live there, and I don't get a chance to see them too often. So what's interesting to me is that even though I was going to this conference that was supposed to have all this spiritual food and inspiration for ideas and all that other kind of stuff, the really cool things that happened, the things that gave me ideas for talks, actually happened when I was with my family. Take that whatever way you would like, but it was actually a good experience. So the one that I love to show here was watching the eclipse and getting all kinds of insights about life from watching the eclipse. In fact, what I will tell you is if you didn't hear that talk, I strongly recommend that you go to YouTube or you go to our website and listen to it, because if I may say so myself, it was a gooder. It was a good one. Yeah. So the other experience that I had while I was there was going to their family's gardening plot one morning, the morning before I was going to the conference. Now there are a couple of things that are kind of remarkable or unusual about that. First of all, I'm not a morning person. So the idea of getting up and going someplace early in the morning to tend a garden, just really not my idea of fun. Number two, there is basically nothing about gardening that appeals to me. I don't do dirt. I don't do bugs. I don't do compost. I don't do digging. But they were so proud of this plot. They really wanted me to go, so I just didn't have the heart to say no either, even though inside I was yeah. And I will tell you, I am so glad that I went, because it was absolutely amazing. You know, you can find things to make talks about anytime, anywhere, when you pay attention. First of all, the big aha to me was that people actually grow their own food. Who knew? And their name is Safeway. Second of all, to realize that I had actually eaten some of that food the night before. Oh my God. And then to add to this, the absolute abundance of nature in that small little plot, so lovingly tended, it moved me. It moved me. And then to realize, I could do a whole talk about this one, but to realize that when they started in the spring, they started out with nothing but dirt. And then they planted these plants. They started from scratch. And then they planted these plants, and a few short months later, there was all this food. OMG! So my task that morning, my brother, he handed me a bucket, and I was supposed to pick these little yellow tomatoes that are called sun gold tomatoes, and they look like this. So they look like they're not ripe, but they are, right? Now this would not seem to be too daunting a task, right? Except, as I mentioned, their plot was absolutely filled with different kinds of tomatoes. I mean, there were the big giant red tomatoes, and the little red tomatoes, and there were the heirloom tomatoes, and there were purple tomatoes, for goodness sake, and there were these little gold tomatoes. So, I mean, there was abundance everywhere. So my brother gives me this bucket, and he tells me how to pick the right ones, how to tell the right ones from the not right ones. So I'm standing there and I'm picking them, right? And the truth is, for every 5 I picked, one of them went into my mouth. Because they were tiny, and they were sweet, and they just kind of like, whoops, popped into my mouth. Because it was like nature's candy, I swear to God. So here I am, I'm picking and I'm snacking and I'm picking and I'm snacking. And at one point I thought, okay, I'm done. I've picked all of the ones that are right. And then, and this is the point of my talk, you were wondering where I was going with this, right? What happened was, I'm picking like this, and all of a sudden I moved myself just a little bit to the right, and there were a whole bunch more that were ripe enough to be picked. And when I thought, so pick, eat, and then I thought I was done again, I got down a little bit lower, and lo and behold, there were even more ripe ones to pick. So it's then that I happened upon this great spiritual truth that I've been waiting weeks to tell you about, and that is that when we look at something from one perspective, it may appear that there's nothing there, or that it's finished, or it's completed. But when we change our perspective just even slightly, and we see it from a different point of view, a world of abundance and possibility opens up. I know! I found this great quote by Olympic medalist Christian Armstrong, who's rides the bike. And she says, it's not only moving that creates new starting points. Sometimes all it takes is a subtle shift in perspective, an opening of the mind, an intentional pause and reset, or a new route to start to see new options and new possibilities. So I invite you to think about that in your own life right now. Is there a situation, is there a relationship, is there a decision where you feel like you're kind of stuck? Maybe if you're like me, you've tried over and over and over and over and over and over and over again to make something change and it just doesn't. Anybody besides me the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Oh, the pictures are funny. Well, maybe the real key to this definition, because this is a profound definition if you think about it, but maybe the real key to this is doing the same thing over and over again in exactly the same way from exactly the same place. Perhaps all it is going to take to have a different result is to simply move our perspective a little bit, just like I did with the tomatoes. Because here's the truth, I don't think a whole bunch of tomatoes ripened while I was picking the others, like all this juice went in and ripened those tomatoes. It's far more likely that what happened was that when I moved my gaze a little bit, when I moved myself, those tomatoes that were hidden by leaves or hidden behind another cluster of tomatoes simply became visible. In other words, they were there all the time. It was just me that couldn't see them. Now I realize how simple that may seem, very, very simplistic, but what I have noticed and what I bet is that almost all of us find ourselves in these situations where we feel stuck or we feel as if we can't move. And one of the reasons why we are stuck is because we are unwilling or unable to see it from another perspective. Yes?
Yes.
Sometimes we're stuck because we are unable or unwilling to see it from another perspective. George Eliot said, "It is a narrow mind which cannot look at a subject from various points of view." And that's part of the challenge for a lot of us. Because, I don't know what it, okay, you know what, I'm not going to speak for you, I'm only going to speak for me. There are times when I don't want to shift my perspective or I don't want to see something from another viewpoint because in doing so, I somehow think that I'm not being true to myself or I'm giving up or I'm giving in. Yes? We live in this world of rightness, don't we? And yet, because the truth is we live in a universe that is filled with limitless possibility, it could well be that the universe is waiting for us to change our perspective and change our way of being, because that's exactly what we need to do in order to open up this wellspring of possibility. It could be that the reason that we are so stuck, that I am so stuck, is because, by golly, I'm right. Yeah. Yes? And yet the reality is, the other person or the other situation thinks that they are equally as right. And it's all that rightness that keeps us at an impasse. For instance, if I had stayed exactly where I was picking those tomatoes, and I believe that my current perspective and my current way of being was the right and only one, then I would have missed out on all of those other yummy tomatoes. Don't get me wrong, I know this isn't easy. I know. Because I like to be right as much as anybody. I'm just as attached to my perspective as others. And yet what I have done, what I have taught myself to do, one of my spiritual practices that I work on a lot, is to actually visually see myself rising above the situation to get a bigger picture. To actually imagine myself up above, almost like an observer self, looking at whatever the situation is, trying to get a different perspective. So we're going to actually practice that right now. I see several of you have your eyes closed already. So close your eyes if you're awake. I don't think it's because you were sleeping. So close your eyes right now. Just for a few moments. And bring to mind a situation in which you feel stuck. And you can only see one side. And as you're looking at that situation, all you can see is your perspective. All you can see is your way of viewing it. Maybe you're in your rightness right now. And now in your mind's eye, just move a little bit to the right or to the left of that situation. And see if your perspective changes. Is there another truth that's hidden behind what you can see? And now imagine that you are rising above the situation so that you are able to see a bigger picture. Actually physically see yourself rising up as if you were being the observer and look at the situation from a higher perspective. From that viewpoint, from that perspective, can you see how the other person or the other situation might have gotten to that place? Can you see the path that maybe they got there? Does the view from above give you more perspective? Can you see more possibilities? Can you see more opportunities? Okay, and I invite you now to come back. As I said, this is a technique that I use often when I'm having trouble seeing another side. It's actually one of my practices. And it's remarkably effective, at least to entertain the idea that maybe there is more to be revealed in a situation. Because as Wayne Dyer said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't revisit the idea about abundance again that I witnessed that morning in the garden. I know I speak a lot about abundance, but that's because it's such a fruitful topic. actually have written, pause for laugh. It doesn't say pause for groan. What it brought to me when I was there was the fact of nature's bounty, nature's abundance is so limitless. I mean, there were tomatoes, there were cucumbers, there were zucchinis, there were herbs. Even if I had tried, I couldn't count everything just in that one little plot in one day. For instance, here is a picture of what we harvested in an hour that morning. And my brother was also watering and digging in the dirt because gardening people apparently like that. But this is what we brought in. So imagine this multiplied by the number of community gardens that are just in Portland alone. And you start to get the idea. We have these limiting beliefs, we have these limiting beliefs about supply and lack, and it's just mistaken thinking. Because abundance and plenty is everywhere if we have the eyes to see it. Which brings me back to perspective. Are we seeing with the eyes of lack, or are we seeing with the eyes of plenty? Are we focusing only on the limited areas that our gaze at that time can see? Or are we shifting and rising above and experiencing the good and the plenty that is always available? Here's my Ernest Holmes quote for today. When we learn to trust the universe, we shall be happy, prosperous, and well. We must learn to come under that divine government and accept the fact that nature's table is ever filled. Never was there a cosmic famine. Can I get an amen to that? Amen. Okay, so I want to close with a sweet little poem. It's just cute, and it's a nice way to end a talk about gardening. And it's simply how to plant a garden. Plant 3 rows of peas. Peace of mind, peace of heart, peace of soul. Plant 4 rows of squash. Squash gossip, squash indifference, squash grumbling, squash selfishness. Plant 4 rows of lettuce. Let us be thankful. Let us be kind. Let us be aware and awake. Let us really love one another. No garden is complete without turnips. Turnip for meetings, turnip for service, turnip to help one another. Always plan for time. Time for reflection, time for study, time for prayer and meditation. And then water freely with patience and cultivate with love. There is much fruit in your garden because you reap what you sow. I love you, and so it is.